welcome everybody to Real Life with Holly and Regina. Regina, how are you doing today?
Doing great today, Holly. How are you?
Good, doing good. Doing good. It's been busy, but that's normal. I had a bit of a glitch with the studio computer, so we started updating it 2 days ago. I haven't done any filming since then. Megan came up to set it up and it was still updating. So like, okay, well, it says it's going to take 30 more minutes. So maybe
And this
not.
started 2 days ago?
Yes. I think it must have like fallen asleep or something, gone to sleep. And then I don't know. Anyways, so here I am at my desk. This is real life.
I love it though, because I've seen that picture, I've seen that. I'm very familiar with that area. And I love that picture of the breakers behind you.
Me too. One of my faves.
So it's really beautiful. So you were just telling me right before we started that the boys are gone. So what is that real life like without, your life just transitions this,
Does.
I guess you
And
gotta get in the rhythm of it.
Yeah, we've been doing this now for, gosh, 2.5 years. So in a way, I've gotten used to it. I mean, you never really quite get used to it, but I'm going to be honest this time. I don't want this to sound bad, like I'm a terrible mother, but about 2 days, usually the few days leading up to the boys leaving, I kind of have this like, oh, just a little bit of heartache. Honestly, this time it's kind of ready. Like, you know what? They can go. They're going to be happy. They're going to be loved. They're going to be well taken care of.
Oh,
And I've got lots of stuff I need to focus on. And I just get into a different zone when it's just Paul and I around. So it's good. Going
that
well.
trip and that RV Martinelli vacation, that was the four of you, joined at the hip
Yeah,
every day for those couple of weeks. So
it was. Yeah, exactly. We were, together nonstop and we had a great time. And the break is nice. I'm going to have to tell you this one funny thing. When about, a few months after my ex-husband and I had separated and we're going through a divorce, and we started right away just sharing the kids back and forth 50-50. And it was so funny because I was living in the same apartment building as my mom, and so her and I were saw each other every single day. We ate all our meals together, we did life together, and it was really good. It was very good to have her support. But so funny, so I have 5 siblings, so she raised 6 kids. She was a stay-at-home mom, and
God bless her.
I know, right? And she told me when, on the weeks I would have a break from the kids, she's like, this is a really great way to do parenting. It's like, it's kind of nice to have a little break.
I can see that. And I think the very first time Roger and I were out to dinner with you guys, and we were talking about this, and you said, well, we're going to have them and they're going to go back to Canada. And I actually thought to myself, that's good. Like if I had known that was a possibility, maybe I would have had a baby. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, most people probably wouldn't see it as the ideal, but you know what? You find that silver lining in everything, right?
But you know what? I really thought about that, and I thought, wow, because when I met Roger, and I knew he was a divorced dad. And when he moved back here to Atlanta, and then I moved, and we would rotate with Andrew's mom having Andrew, I thought this is the best of all worlds. I mean, forgive us for saying this. If you're not a fan of this, we get it.
Yeah.
But I really thought there's some sort of magic in that. Okay, it's our turn, it's not our turn, because you get to experience, I don't know, life at a different level is how I look at it.
You do. And you know what? I really truly believe it is good for the kids. I mean, I think it's a lot better for the kids than being stuck in an unhappy home with 2 unhappy parents. But I also, what I really am grateful for my boys is they get to see, life lived in 2 quite different ways. And it opens their eyes, gives them perspective to, the different choices they have in life.
I love that.
There's different ways of doing life, and they get to experience, 2 very different ways and decide for themselves what they want as they grow older.
Not to mention they're going to have 1 million Delta Sky Miles when they get 16.
Yes. Yes, they're getting up there already.
But there's something to be said for that, Holly, about taking a break, whether it's kids or or with each other because, and I know some people know this, and I don't even know if we've talked to you guys about this completely, but Roger in 2019, he was moving to LA to
Mm,
take a position with AT&T,
yeah.
and they needed some of their Atlanta people out in LA. And we didn't know what that was going to look like. We just know that it appealed to us to
Yeah.
keep our home here in Atlanta and to be out in LA. And I was going to be bi-coastal, which I thought was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
So the fact that your kids go back and forth, I love it for them. But I
Yeah.
thought this is going to be so great. And everybody I talked to, especially the women, they were like, what do you now? So Roger's going to be gone. And so like, you're going to have time to yourself. Like, well, they were all, every friend that we talked to was almost not jealous,
Yeah.
but they saw the appeal of that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll be at home for like a week or so alone. And then I'll go to LA. And sometimes Roger, people loved that.
Yeah.
And we were disappointed that it didn't last longer than 7 months because of,
Yeah.
like, is it over? We were just getting
Yeah.
started.
Well, I think it also it you have an appreciation for the other person when you have that time apart. There's something like, I mean, Paul and I we had a bunch of long distance time in our relationship because
Yes.
I was up in Canada half the time, and then before I had my green card, and then down here back and forth. And yeah, I mean, you appreciate the other person, I think, when you have that time apart. And even now when we live together, full time, you still, that appreciation kind of carries forward, I think, in a different way than if you hadn't had that experience.
Oh my gosh, you're so true because we did the back and forth LA for 7 months because we
Yeah.
got the place out there in the summer of 2019. And then, of course, by the time COVID happened, early 2020, it was done. But let me just say that when I would go out to LA, when I would fly out there, it did make me appreciate Roger in a whole different light. And then when it was time for COVID and we were here together all the time, I
Yeah.
was really thankful for that time apart because it was like a boost for us. Even if you don't think you need the boost, wherever your relationship is, it was just a boost and it was fun. Like neither one of us knew LA very well. And so when I come there, we do different things, we go to different places, and I'm like, this is just the coolest thing ever. And I think that people sometimes are like, you live apart? What? But most of all of our friends, when they were honestly talking with us, people were so for this, Holly.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you. So, what do you think, being apart from Paul, how long were the intervals? Because I didn't really
Yeah.
know you when that was happening.
Yeah, we would usually, and this is crazy, but usually it was a week on, a week off. So I was traveling basically every weekend. So I'd either fly down to Florida on the weekend, or the next weekend I'd be flying back to Canada, and it would be 1 week in each location. So I mean, that was exhausting, I will say, just from a travel perspective. But it did, yeah, though, I mean, I think you also, those weeks apart, we figured out how to connect with each other when you don't have
Yeah,
the physical connection. And that's such an important part of a relationship, especially,
oh
a
my God.
marriage, or, you know,
And
yeah.
and you're right about that. And I think with Roger and I, we have been married. Let's see, last year, earlier this year, we celebrated 15 years. And so if we go back a couple of years, we're at that 12, 13-year mark. And I was sort of all in for Roger's life. When we
Yeah.
were first married, I was about him and Andrew and the business. And it sort of took me a little while. No regrets. It
Yeah.
took me a little while to sort of be me,
Mm,
be me again. And when we were apart, it really gave me a chance to sort of examine what I wanted a little bit more. And even though it was short lived over that 7 months, it was really a boost to me. So we talked about the boost of the relationship. It was a
yeah.
boost to me personally as a person that I could live on my own and do things on my own because that had been very little timing in my life of being on my own. There had been
Yeah.
just little bits of that in my life. And so for Roger not to be here, I could focus, like I would wake up and I could focus completely on me because when I first was married, right or wrong, I was a lot about us, a lot about him. And, that's the choice I made. I was fine with that. But it was so nice, not just to have that stronger connection with him. It was nice. And I don't know how you feel about this, Holly. It was nice that I could focus on myself when we weren't
Yep.
together and kind of wrap my mind around what I wanted to do in this time in my life and what I wanted to do even when we were back together again full time.
Yeah.
So that was
That's
another
really
great
good.
benefit.
You know what's interesting hearing you say that, Regina? Honestly, I think for me it was kind of it happened the opposite way because when we were apart, I was so focused on, okay, how do I stay connected? How do I, I can't do things for Paul in person. So how do I show him I love
Mm,
him long distance? And in a way, kind of lost a little bit of, not lost myself, but lost what you're talking about in terms of that focus on yourself and that need to really examine yourself and take care of yourself. And it was really once we were together full time that I started realizing just kind of a little bit, it was a little skewed and like, you know what, maybe I haven't taken
mm,
the time for me that I need to. And now that we're together, it's like, okay, I don't need to worry about, are we, does he know, am I expressing my love to him sufficiently? Do I have enough time to, and am I able to do enough things to show him that I love him and to keep that connection? And it was almost like, okay, you know what, we're together. We're really, we're tight, we're good, we're strong. Maybe, you know what, maybe I need to kind of turn inward and start looking, start kind of taking care of me in a different way than I had before. And not that I,
mm.
was neglecting our relationship. It just changed my perspective kind of changed on that.
I think it's easy for women in particular to really, because we're nurturers and caretakers, regardless of our personality style. I think
Yeah.
by nature, most of us are just nurturers and caretakers. And there's just something in us that wants to care for the other people around us. And so it's different how that happened for both of us. And, Roger and I were no strangers to being long distance because
Yeah.
we met in Jacksonville. And for a year and a half, we were there together. We first started dating, when we got serious, um, all of that. And then he had an opportunity to move back to Atlanta, which was great because this is where his son lives. And then we were going to do long distance relationships. So I think every 2 or 3 weeks, I was on a plane here.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, I was already a young girl having lived on my own. I was 32 when I got married. So I was used to being independent. Then I became all in for Roger
Yeah.
and sort of lost a little bit of that. So
Yeah.
the LA thing just gave us a great opportunity. I couldn't believe how much, because Roger and I are best friends. I think it's like what you and Paul have. We're best friends. So we're connected. We love doing things together. But it was so cool for me to go back and say, I've been married for 12, 13 years. I can really be on my own again. I can really do all of this. This is so silly, but even like, when I would travel, which wasn't a lot on my own before all of this and before personal growth and going to IMC events or EL events, I didn't travel a ton on my own. Roger would always take me to the airport. And in this town, going to the airport is an event.
Yes, it sure is.
It's an event. You pack a lunch, you go to the restroom, like it's an event going to the airport here. And so even driving myself to the airport, knowing that I could get to the airport and then when I landed back here from LA, get home and just it just gave me a sense of independence that I
Mhm.
had lost a tiny little bit of along the way of being married, being
Mhm.
Roger's wife and being involved in the business. And so the long distance, whether it's with our kids or with our spouses, the together and the away,
Yeah.
just think that in this country, maybe we missed the boat on sort of promoting that.
Well, and you think about like there's all kinds of, people from all different cultures who have a totally different, like people who travel to a different country in order to work and make money and send it back to their family. I think of, the cruises that Paul and I have been on, and a lot of the staff on those cruises are, they have families and they're away from their families for, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months at a time. And it's just like, but they're doing it because they want to provide, they see the value in being able
Yeah.
to provide for their family at a higher level than maybe they would have the opportunity to in their own country. And it's like, you know what? Maybe being away from your family isn't the worst thing in the world. Maybe there is value to it. And No, I think it's, yeah, again,
I
like,
think we, I think we sort of spin it a little bit like a fairy tale here in our society, in our culture. Oh, you have to be together, the kids, the husband and wife, the family unit. But there is a lot of value in that. And what you were just saying, my dad was in the Navy.
yeah,
So in my younger years, my dad would be on a ship for 6 months, 8 months at a time, and we wouldn't see him.
yeah.
And that gave us a lot of great time with my mom and with each other. And I think that's why we were tight knit with my mom. And my dad would have to get like reintroduced to the family, sort of, because we were really small. I didn't think I had a dad.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
so young when he was gone so much.
Yeah.
And that did make us have an appreciation of being together. But
Mm,
even you think about our servicemen and women, which my dad served for 30 years. It was his whole life being in the Navy and loved it. And my mom loved it. And I think maybe that being apart and being together, maybe that's also why when we look at it through our lives of having been in long distance relationships with our spouses and your kids
yeah.
having go back and forth, there's just, I think, some value that maybe we don't always talk about in our society of that time apart, because everybody thinks you have to be joined at the hip as a couple. And while that's great, and Roger and I are certainly those people when we're together,
Yeah.
there's just value in that being apart.
Well, you know
And
what?
yeah,
Yeah, that is so refreshing to hear you say that, Regina, and just from your experience growing up, because there's a very real part for me that, when I tell people, especially people who don't really know me,
mhm,
oh yeah, my kids are, with me half the time, they're up in Canada half the time, 6 weeks at a time. There's often just this kind of feeling of guilt, like, okay, they're going to judge me because that's not really the way families should be structured, and that's not really what's best for the kids. And
mhm,
and it's like, so if that's what we're saying, then what about, all those servicemen and women, like you said? Like, are we saying,
so
okay, well,
good.
they're not taking care of their family the way they should be? No. Like,
So good.
wow, like the guilt that we place on ourselves, for parents who are separated or divorced, for parents who have to work away from their families for long stretches of time, truckers, that would be another,
Yes.
pilots, like there's so many different professions that require that. And does that make that profession or that individual any, like of lower value? Or no, I mean, they're
You
so
hit the nail
important.
on the head, though, when you said that even when you talk about it, you're wondering if people are judging. And then what about the pilots, the servicemen and women, people in the hospitality industry like cruises,
Yeah.
and people who have to work away from home to make money? Is there something wrong with that? And the truth is, we know there isn't,
Yeah.
because my dad was gone quite a bit when we were young, but we never questioned our dad's love for us. We
Mm,
never questioned his ability as a provider for us. I mean, we had a really nice life with my dad in the Navy,
yeah.
and my mom and dad seemed, from what us kids knew, and they were married for almost 41 years before my dad died. Uh,
Wow.
it seemed a good relationship that worked. And
Yeah.
so, and that's what I look at when I think about you and your boys, and when I see you all together, when I see them with Paul, it feels like it just works, because there's that value of being apart, experiencing that something new and different, and then coming back together. That is going to so serve your children, Holly, I believe. And I'm so glad you just shared that with us, because I don't think there's anything to feel guilty about.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to say maybe, but when you told us that, I promise you, my first instinct was like, oh, that's good. That
Mm,
is so good. Because I think for women, you're all in as a mom.
yeah.
The years go by, and we know a lot of women are like, well, I didn't focus on my career. Maybe I wish I had a little bit, or wish I had a little something else in my life. And
Yeah.
so I think you and I are totally on the same page about this, that there's some value to be placed in that together and then apart, and then together and apart. I think there's a lot of value in that we just don't talk about a lot.
I agree.
Yeah.
You know what came to mind? I mean, Regina, we totally haven't talked at all about what we're going to talk about,
Yeah.
but I think this
Well,
is
we'll
so
start for the
good.
next one.
This is so good. Um, you know what? I think this type of a lifestyle really requires you to develop is like a higher level of trust. Like I have to,
Oh,
I mean, when Paul and I were in a long distance relationship, there's a lot of trust that goes into that. When my kids are up in Canada, I have to develop trust in the people who are taking care of them, and their dad, and in their grandparents. and I do. And it's, it's been a process to really develop that and to be like, okay, yeah, you know what? We do have a good relationship. I do trust him and I can continue to develop that level of trust. And it's like, wow, what a valuable thing to be able to develop and to model for my kids, for them to see, okay, what trust looks like, and that it's okay not to be together all the time because we trust each other and we trust that everyone's going to be taken care of, and that we're not going to do things to hurt the other person, on purpose, or those kinds of things.
So good, because that's exactly what this is. That is moving our ability to trust each other at a higher level than maybe, I don't know this for sure, that maybe that most people don't get a chance. Because Roger and I will sometimes watch these silly reality shows where someone's got to look through the other person's phone. And I was like, it would never occur to me to look for Roger.
I know, yeah.
And you're right. I mean, he was moving to LA. He's got this apartment there. I'm here at our house in Atlanta. And it never for a second. And I would say this to people. I would say, I'm a realist. I'm a realist. Could something happen outside of my, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do I think it would? No, I don't think that at all.
Yeah.
But I have this level of trust that I slept well every night.
Yeah.
Not knowing exactly where Roger was, who he was chatting with, what was happening after work. I just had this level of trust because that is, I know the person that I married. And you're right, it just requires that digging deep, and we get to model it. We get to practice it. And that is the coolest thing, because I never doubted him. And I also would tell people, listen, if something happens, we'll address that. But in my heart, I don't believe that, but I'm also not going to be naive. I live in the real world and things unexpected happen, but I love and I trust my husband, and I get to really practice what I say I believe. And you're right. When you get to model this for your children on top of it, I mean, how good is that? How good is that? And this was really good, because I had talked about this whole time together, time apart with Roger thing in a while and at a high level. But I think about your boys, and I think about how blessed they are that they get to be with you and Paul, and they get to go be in Canada with their dad and grandparents who love them and will take care of them. And they have the best of these two worlds.
Yeah, they do.
I can't wait to see how that's going to impact them in their teenage years and beyond. They better still know that I'm their favorite.
Oh, they will. They will. You are absolutely. I mean, I can't speak as much for Emerson, but I know for Caleb, you are 100% Caleb's favorite.
I've got one. That's all I need. It'll come around.
I mean, Emerson loves you too. He's just a little more. He doesn't show it in the same way that Caleb does.
That high, deep personality.
Exactly. Oh, so good. Wow, Regina, this was amazing. I love this just spontaneous conversation. This was so good. Well, I mean, our time is pretty much to an end. So I guess next week we'll dive into what we originally were going to talk about today. But yeah, wow. Oh, and let me just remind everyone who's tuning in today, the next segment of the sales training, Paul's free sales training that he's offering, is coming up on Saturday. It's at 8 a.m. I'm telling you again, if you haven't signed up, you've got to sign up. And actually, Paul extended the replay time for the first module. So both the first and second module are still available for replay right now for the next few days. So I'm sure someone's putting a link in the comments.
So good.
Yeah,
so
I know.
Sales training is not even, it's sales. It is all of life, because everything I get out of it is sales, but then it takes your life to a higher level, everything about your personal growth. So you got to get in on the sales training.
Absolutely. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Regina. This was such a pleasure. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. We will see you all again next week.
Bye, everybody.